here today. We'll just pop onto the next slide. There we go. So, as you all know, because I have seen some comments in the chat as well, the topic of today is quite an important one for you guys. So, what we're going to cover today is techniques for improving your taste and smell. And we'll be focusing on some tips and tricks of how to do that. Next slide, please. So let's introduce you to the team today. Obviously, you know Hannah. She's our amazing IT expert and organises these amazing events. My name's Faye, and I'm a speech therapist by background, and I've been working as a clinical educator here at Atos Medical for the last 2.5 years. So I'm going to introduce you to my partner in crime, who is on this slide as well, and she's going to introduce herself.
Hi everybody, I hope everybody's well. I'm Alison Dempster. I'm a speech and language therapist by background, like Faye is, and I have worked as a clinical educator at Atos for almost 3 years. In the next few days, it will be 3 years in fact. So yeah, nice to see everybody. Welcome.
Fabulous. Okay, so our usual formalities for those who've been to some of these webinars before, we're going to go through a quick disclaimer. So this is a corporate presentation from Atos Medical Group. Nothing in this presentation provides any diagnosis, clinical advice, indication, guide, warranty or guarantee. Nothing in this presentation can substitute individual advice or guidance from a qualified healthcare professional. Any testimonials relate to how one individual has experienced the use of Atos products or techniques, and not every person will get the same result. So this event is being recorded. By joining this webinar, you are consenting to being recorded during the event. And I think we're going to just run through a few housekeeping rules because we've got so many of you on the call, which is amazing. But the workshops are really aimed at being very interactive. So if you do want to contribute during the discussions, please feel free to pop your cameras on and your microphones on. We will be going through a couple of the slides during this time, so if you can make sure that you're muted whilst we're going through the slides just because of background noise, that'd be great. If you aren't aware that there's any background noise, Hannah will potentially mute you just so that everybody can hear what it is that we're saying. So obviously if it comes to the discussion point, you might actually be on mute without realising it. So please do remember to switch that back on. Okay, so our agenda for today, quite jam-packed. We're going to be looking at what causes the loss of taste and smell and the impact that this can have on quality of life. And you guys are going to be fundamental in giving us that feedback and insight. What we will be doing is looking at a few techniques that you can use that may help you regain some of your taste and smell, and things that you can go away and practice over time and hopefully build on that. And there will be an opportunity throughout the session and also at the end for any questions or things, comments, or even your own tips and tricks that you've come across. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Okay, let's move on. So what we'd like to do first is start off with a poll. So just like the poll at the beginning, it should pop up on your screens. If you're on a mobile device or on a tablet and it doesn't pop up, you might need to just pop into the chat function and it should be there. And it's really looking at who has noticed changes with their taste and smell since having their total laryngectomy.
I can't see that.
Okay, so could be in the chat bubble. You might be able to see it there.
It's in chat.
So the question is, who's noticed any changes with their taste and smell? So it could be no change at all. It could be a change to your taste only, a change to your smell only, or a change to both. If you don't see the pop-up on your screens, if you just pop it in the chat, what your experience is, it'll give us a nice idea of what's going on. Okay, so you can see we've got some responses coming through, which is great. Chris, I can see that you've got your hand up. Do you want to either unmute yourself and ask a question or pop it into the chat? So Alan's getting an error message when selecting the response. That's okay, Alan. If you just want to pop it into the chat, that would be great. Okay, thank you, Carolyn. That's really helpful to know. Changes to both, Alan. Yeah, okay. Okay, so there's nobody yet has mentioned that they haven't had a change, which I think is what we would obviously expect, that there will be some change to your taste or smell or both. The majority of you are expressing that there is a change to both, and it might be in different degrees. So we do know that obviously after a total laryngectomy, there can be some complete or partial impairment of the taste and smell. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over onto the next slide to Alison, who's going to take us through how taste and smell changes after a total laryngectomy.
Okay, thank you, Faye. So if we move on to the next slide, we can have a think about how taste and smell change after surgery, and we can have a look at how smell and taste work before laryngectomy to get a better understanding of this. So here comes the sciencey bit, and we can see from the top diagram, which is a sort of side-on view of this head that's been sort of cut and turned, we can see that before laryngectomy, when we breathe in, air enters the nose and then travels to the lungs. And when we breathe out, air travels from the lungs out through the nose. Now, this breathing air in and out of the nose stimulates the smell receptors in the nasal cavity. And it's these receptors in the nose that are responsible for you being able to taste and smell. And when we breathe air out through the nose during chewing, both taste and smell receptors are stimulated. So air after surgery is unable to travel in and out the nasal cavity. And similarly, when we have a cold, the nasal cavity gets blocked up with mucus, and that's why we're often unable to taste or smell, because air can no longer travel in and out the nose and stimulate these receptors. Okay, if we move on to the next slide, as I've mentioned, after laryngectomy, air is no longer breathed in and out through the nose, and instead all the air that's breathed in and out is via the stoma. So as a result of this, no air can get to these smell receptors in the nasal cavity. The air completely bypasses the upper airway, and that's why many people are unable to smell and taste after surgery. Okay, so that's just to explain a little bit about why there are changes to taste and smell after surgery. Now we would like to have a little think about the impact and the consequences of losing your taste and your smell after surgery. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next slide. So I'm sure we would all agree that eating and drinking is a real source of enjoyment. Certainly for me, I just look forward to meal times, and it's such a nice thing to sit down and enjoy the nice taste of a meal. And when we become unable to taste or smell food and drink, it really can have a big impact on the enjoyment that we experience at meal times. And you might have found since your surgery, if your taste and smell's been affected, that you've maybe become a bit less interested in food. You might find that you eat less than you did before your surgery, or now you only really like to eat some foods. And in addition to being unable to taste food as well before laryngectomy, you might find that you're not able to enjoy the smell of certain things that you like to enjoy before, such as maybe the smell of freshly cut grass or bread that's baking in the oven, flowers or perfume. So there's also the aspect of maybe being unable to smell warning signs in your surgery, such as smoke or a gas leak. So losing the sense of smell can have big implications for safety as well. And we're going to be showing you a technique today within the session that can be used to try and improve your sense of taste and smell. Okay, just moving on to the next slide, please. Okay, so if we think about what we've found in the poll, most people are saying that their taste and smell has changed since their surgery. So we just wondered if anybody has any comments on this. It can be anything really, whether you might still be able to smell certain things and taste certain foods, but not others. It might be, you might want to speak about something that you miss the most when it comes to taste and smell. Maybe there's something that you can still smell quite well. Despite not being able to taste and smell other things. So really, we want just to open up things now and just have a chat about losing taste and smell and what that means for you. Is it a big deal, or do you think you're not really bothered by it, and how it makes you feel in everyday life? Okay. Anybody want to say anything first? Yes, John.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah, we can.
So it's not so much taste. I can deal with that. That is what it is. But for me, it's smell. It's a really big thing. You know, flowers in the garden, or going for a walk and freshly cut grass or anything. I can't smell a thing, and I do miss it, and it gets me down.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. Would anybody else agree with what John said?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's with me. I tend to be able to smell strong scents and taste strong, spicy things. It's the more subtle or blander tastes and smells that I've lost.
Okay.
Yeah.
However, depending on which way I'm stood and the way the wind's blowing, it varies because we smell and taste things differently. So it's luck at the draw, basically, whether I can or can't.
Yeah, that's quite a common thing actually that a number of people do report to us as speech therapists, that actually it's extremes that you can either taste or smell. But those subtleties are the bits that we miss, and the subtleties are the bits that sort of give us our experiences in life, aren't they? So it's whilst they might be subtle, they do have a big impact on how we perceive the world and how we remember certain things. There'll be smells that come up that'll evoke a memory. So it's those sorts of things as well. Anybody else had any sort of similar or different experiences?
I have. I lose taste and smelling when I have chest infection.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're a little bit more congested, and if you think about your pre-laryngectomy life, of course, when we have a cold, as Alison said, or we're a little bit congested, our taste and smell are impacted in that stage. So now we're talking about a completely different airflow system that you all have, which is already impacting on that. But then if you get an illness like a chest infection or a cold or something like that, then that's going to make it even harder for you guys to have that experience of taste and smell. So we've had a couple of comments in the chat as well, just saying that people have lost interest. James has lost interest in food, just really eats because he knows he has to, but doesn't really enjoy it. Ian can't smell anything, really frustrating. Can taste, but a lot less than before surgery. And then we've got another guest whose taste has returned, but the smell is poor. Oh, they've had to leave because they're working. That's okay. So Alan is suggesting trying spices if you like them, so garlic and chili. So lots and lots of experience in this forum here. Gary, I know you were going to say something. Sorry, what was it that you were going to say? Sorry, that's me cutting across you rudely. Okay. Has anybody tried any sort of techniques to help with their sense of smell, particularly? Okay. Anybody want to share their experience? Okay, John?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, who have we got there?
The way that I get some sense of a smell is by tasting the air with the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
So I can taste sometimes perfume. I get a sensation on the front of my tongue.
You can taste his way to perfume on his tongue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't smell it, but if
No.
I get in real close, I can taste it.
Right. So the two are so strongly interlinked, aren't they? And as Alison talked about with the diagrams that we showed you, obviously the airflow that goes through the nose stimulates those smell receptors. But when you're chewing, of course, the two are very, very closely linked in terms of having your taste receptors as well stimulated. So that's a really, really useful tip. So that's something that others can try. Anything else that anyone's tried that they found useful or beneficial? Gary? So it tries you sucking in the air. So I think that by the sounds of it, the technique that you're talking about might actually be the technique that we're going to have a little practice of today. So we can have a little look and see whether that's something that you've been already doing, or whether it's something new. Has anybody had any of this? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to ask, does everybody feel that if their sense of taste and smell could be improved, it would have a really big impact on the way that you feel about sort of well-being? Yeah, that would make a big difference to enjoyment of life. And yeah, okay.
Make me feel normal.
Yeah, make you feel normal. Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? Has anybody ever been offered any sort of therapy for this with their clinicians, or has it ever been discussed in any of your clinic appointments?
There are notices in my clinic about being aware of fire and making sure your fire alarm, gas alarm are all, working.
Yeah.
Because it can be dangerous, of course.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we think about the pleasure, but actually those safety issues are huge. You know, if you can't smell smoke, or you're only going to know about it when it's sort of a little bit too late. So yes, those are useful techniques. Right. So Cliff has been told that there's a technique called reverse smelling, but not actually been taught it. Okay. So if we could bring back the slides, what we'll do is we will go into this technique for smelling, and let's have a little practice and see whether we can do it. So what would be ideal is if you have something to hand that has an odor. It can be anything from a drink to some perfume or anything at all, because we're going to start to talk through this technique, and then you can have a little practice. Now, as with anything new that we try, it does take a little bit of time and a little bit of practice to get to grips with it. But what we'll hopefully be able to do today is talk about the theory. So this is what you're going to try and do. Then we've got a couple of videos that show you how to do it, and then we can have a little bit of a practice. Okay, so the method that we're going to talk about is the polite yawn. Okay. So this is a method that does help individuals who've had a total laryngectomy to try and regain their capacity to smell. We're here to obviously help you, show you this technique, although your speech therapist might be able to provide you with a more personalised regime of exercises. And I think the key for all of this is that practice is key. the more you do it, the better this stimulus will be, the better these receptors will be at picking up some of those more subtle smells. So how this technique works is that you are going to create a vacuum within this upper airway. And so that draws air into the nasal passages, and by doing this, the sense of smell can be enhanced because you're getting some airflow that's going back into that nasal cavity. So it's known as the polite yawn, and the reason it's called that is because the movements that you use are exactly like those when you try to yawn with your mouth closed. So if you've ever been in a situation whereby you're trying to stifle a yawn, this is exactly what you're wanting to do. Okay, so if we just move on to the next slide, what you're aiming to achieve, and again, what we're looking at is the head cut in half and turned to the side. So you've got this large space where the white bit is, that's the nasal cavity, okay? And the little lines that are pointing downwards, they're your smell receptors. Now, what you're aiming to do is do a very quick downward motion of that lower jaw and tongue while keeping your lips closed, and that creates this vacuum which draws air into the nose. And once you've got to grips with the big movement, you can actually get to grips with just doing much smaller movements so they're less noticeable, but still as effective. So I think the easiest way for us to do that is to show you a couple of videos. So if we go to the next slide. Now the first video on your left, which we're going to show, just shows exactly what you're aiming to do. So if we can play that one first. Okay. So you're keeping your lips together, lowering your jaw and tongue down. That's it. And make sure you keep a tight seal on those lips because you want all the air that the vacuum is creating to be sort of taken up into the nasal cavity. Okay. Now, the idea of this is that when you do this a number of times and pop whatever it is that you're trying to smell in front of your nose, as it draws up the air, it will also draw up the odor. Okay. Fantastic. What we'll do is we'll have a look at the second video. Now this is in Dutch, okay, but it's subtitled because it just shows a really nice view from the front and then also from the side. Oh, we can't hear him, which is fine. We don't need to hear him, but you can see what he's saying.
Oh, he's been trained to smell now. Very calmly.
Okay. So if we can take down the slides just for a second, Hannah, that'd be great. Okay, so as you've seen on those videos, the idea is that whatever it is that you're wanting to smell, if you have that in front of your nose, and then obviously keeping your lips together, dropping down that jaw, and just creating that vacuum to bring that air into the nasal passage, should give those stimulation to those receptors. Okay, and it's really good to be able to practice this with a number of different smells, starting with stronger smells that you're more likely to be able to smell anyway, and then moving further down to more subtle smells. How's everybody finding that? Any impact?
Yes, I can smell a Sharpie.
You can smell a Sharpie?
I
Brilliant.
can. That's the first thing I've smelled in 6 months.
First thing you smell in 6 months. Wow, that worked, Ian. Well done.
Does everybody feel like they've got the movement of the jaw and the tongue? Because it can be a bit strange to start with because we don't really do that with our mouths and our jaw. So maybe just...
Ben, you can smell your Vimto. I'm really impressed. See, John, now you can't be smelling Sharpies too much because you'll be high as a kite by the end of the session. Okay. So it's a really simple technique, but it's really effective. It's not very strong, but you can't. Oh, right. So, James, I mean, sage and alone, the smell sometimes isn't very strong anyway. So the fact that you can even get a faint smell from that is really good. That's impressive. So the key with this is that, like we've explained, by dropping that jaw down and doing that, it's almost like a pumping motion. If you do it a good number of times, what it does is it just creates that vacuum, sucks that air up into the nasal cavity, and allows those receptors to remember that they're still there and they still work. And so now when you are out, because I know that a couple of people said they don't go in the garden anymore because they can't smell the flowers. Well, now's your time to practice this in every situation. So as we showed in the video, they were quite big movements that the lady and the gentleman were actually doing. And initially, that's the sort of movement that we want you to do because it really gets you used to that jaw lowering down. But eventually, you might find that actually the movements you need are a lot more subtle. So you don't necessarily need to lower the jaw as much. But that will happen over time and practice. So definitely, it's a really simple trick, but it works. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, I'm going to be going round the supermarket looking like there's something wrong with me.
Hey, you know what? I think if you can smell, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And again, like I say, the initial motion is quite a sort of big movement, but once you've got to grips with it, you'll be able to judge how much you actually need to lower your jaw to be able to get that sense of smell.
Yes, Lorraine.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, okay. I need parts now to do the.
Lorraine, did you want to say something? You had your hand up there.
Yes, sorry, I have a trachea, as you can see.
Yeah.
Could you just tell me about the guy who was on the other clip with the tongue movement? Could you just say that again?
Okay. Yeah. Alison, did you want to take that one? Did you want me?
What can you are you wondering who this? Sorry, Lorraine, can you say that again? I didn't quite catch. Did you catch that, Faye?
So you were wondering what the gentleman was doing with his tongue?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was
Okay.
doing exactly the same as the lady, but what he was trying to show was like a front view of what that would look like. And then obviously when he turned to the side, you could see the jaw coming down. But essentially, it's exactly the same movement. So the tongue would sit within the lower jaw, and then the lower jaw would go down with the tongue, and that creates that vacuum. So yeah, it's just two different perspectives, really, just to give you a bit of a flavour of what that looks like from all angles. Because sometimes it's quite hard to describe this to someone, but when you see someone doing it, it's much easier to see. So the videos are really helpful for that.
And as Faye said earlier, a good way to think about it is if you try and do a yawn on purpose, but keep your lips closed. So it is doable, it's tricky, but if you can do a yawn, just make yourself do a yawn, but keep your lips closed and just think about what's happening to your jaw and your tongue, and you should be able to feel them moving down. So that's the kind of movement that we're aiming for. So it is, I mean, it is just having a wee practice at that and trying to get familiar with how it feels.
I'm loving some of the descriptions that we've got. So Carolyn, absolutely. Just pretend you're a rabbit twitching your nose. If it works, that's absolutely fine. I love it. Sorry, Alison, there was just another comment.
I was just gonna ask if anybody has sort of discovered any movements of their face or their neck that maybe do result in a bit better sense of smell and taste.
Me, no.
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 Gary?
It makes me coughing.
Yeah. So if you move that position, it causes you to cough. It's irritated, is it? Yeah. Okay. And it can be difficult depending on what also you have over your stoma. If you have a tracheostomy, then that's going to be slightly different from the laryngectomies that are here. Oh yeah, definitely a good idea. We can potentially look at how we can get the video to you so you can have another look at it. Would it be helpful for people to put the video up and play it again? Yeah? Okay,
Do that.
that's no
Yeah.
problem. We can do that. Yeah, head and neck positions can vary depending on whether you're impacted because of your laryngectomy or tracheostomy. So obviously neck positions might be a little bit easier if you have had a laryngectomy rather than tracheostomy, because obviously the neck movements can irritate and cause quite a lot of coughing. So that can sometimes be problematic. That's where this sort of technique will come in handy. So you're not having to try any sort of adjustments to your positioning. But again, even for sort of laryngectomies who have a Larry tube, again, if with some movements that can cause a little bit of irritation as well. So this can be something that's quite handy to be able to use to avoid having to do any other position changes to your head and neck. So that can be quite helpful. Angie, I know that you popped a quick comment in. Do you breathe in through your nose? So obviously the idea is that you're not going to be breathing. You don't have to be able to breathe through the upper airway. Okay. So for tracheostomies, it's slightly different because you may have some airflow already through the upper airways, but for laryngectomies, we don't have that. So what you find is that this vacuum sucks air into the nasal cavity. So you don't actually have to have the ability to breathe in, because if you're able to breathe in, then those receptors are already going to be stimulated. So this is more for potentially if you have a tracheostomy, you will have a cuff that's inflated, and so therefore no airflow is coming up through the upper airways. Or if you're a laryngectomy, then obviously we've completely changed how you breathe and everything happens through the stoma. So it's slightly different, but the principle is exactly the same. So let's have a little look at that. Have we got the video up there?
No, I'll put it up now.
Fabulous. Let's have another little look and you can have a bit of a practice again. Yes, indeed. A comment in the chat. Having no smell isn't all bad. It has its advantages, especially in London Underground trains, public and home toilets. I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree. Or my daughter's feet. That's definitely one I would not miss.
Or the dog's coat.
Wet dog. If we have a look at once we've seen this gentleman, we can have a look at the lady. She shows a really nice movement.
Tongue comes down with it.
Yeah, the tongue goes down with it. That's the key. So you're not just moving the jaw down, you want the jaw and the tongue down because that's what creates that vacuum. Oh, brilliant. I'm glad that everybody's loving the Vimto. Well, Hannah, me too. I'm a big Vimto fan.
It's all I drink. Gary, you've got your hand up there. Did you want to speak?
Yeah.
You just need to unmute yourself. Oh, there we go.
My laryngectomy, I have a speech valve with it, and I've made it easier to load my ear gently.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So by closing off the HME as well, it just promotes the fact that you're not going to get distracted almost by having air going in this way. So sometimes that can work for people as well. Some people don't need to occlude their HME so that they can smell and they're able to do that movement and draw enough air in that it stimulates. But sometimes that coordination can be a little bit off. So again, it's really individual. Some people find it helpful to occlude their HME and others don't necessarily need to. So it's about playing around with it, seeing what works for you, where you get the maximum amount of stimulation for those receptors, because there's a lot of individuality for this. Okay, so everybody's had an opportunity to have a go, which is brilliant. Some people have had some immediate success, so that's great. What I would say is, in terms of practice, as much as you like. This is not going to do you any harm. And usually, what we suggest initially is, certainly before meal times, definitely as you've got your meal in front of you, carry this out so that you get that stimulus from smelling the food that you're going to be eating. That can also help, again, once you're actually chewing and swallowing, to do that motion, so that you're getting both taste and smell. So, again, practice this at meal times. That can be really helpful. What we do know from the research is that this technique can have really positive impacts on the sense of smell. And here we can see that in a particular study, the results of measurements after rehab showed that 75% of patients had an improved airflow into the nasal cavity. Okay. This is specific around laryngectomy patients. 78% of patients using this technique had a better sense of smell, and 40% of the patients actually became normosmic, which basically means they regained their normal level of smell. So it can work. It does take practice. You may need or want some support from your speech and language therapist. So by all means, go back to them. If they need any support with this training, then they can contact us. But it is a nice, easy technique that gives you another tool in your toolbox. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Alison now, who's going to talk to you about improving your ability to taste.
Okay, thank you, Faith. So if we now think about some of the types of food that can help boost our sense of taste, and we've already spoken about spicy foods, sort of being able to heighten our sense of taste. So that's something that people could try. You could try adding some spices into your food, eating some curries if you don't already. But if we move on to the next slide, we can see some of the categories of food that could stimulate the different areas of the tongue. So as we said before, I mean, it's enjoying the taste and the smell of food is one of the most basic but enjoyable things that we do in life. So just looking at some different food types, we've got our sweet foods, such as sugary foods such as honey, jams, and then umami foods. I hadn't heard of this before. I don't know if anybody else has heard of umami foods, but these, Hannah's saying she has, but these foods are savoury. So they stimulate our sense of savoury, such as soy sauces, broths, and meat. And then we've got our salty foods, such as salted nuts or fish. Sour foods, so maybe things like lemons. Then bitter foods, such as coffee. So coffee would be categorised as a bitter food. So after surgery, you might be able to taste some of these more than others. So what we would say is, whilst you're practicing the technique that we've spoken about, the Polite Yawn technique, try and introduce some different foods into your diet to try, because it may just be that you discover something that A, you really like, and B, that you can taste really, really well. So you can maybe think about adding spices and seasoning to your food. So there's lots and lots of herbs and spices out there. If you go to the supermarket, there's shelves of spices that you can add. And you can just be really creative with how you can substitute things in recipes. So for example, you could use, if you're making a sauce that's got a tomato base and you want to try and something else, you can make your sauce from roasted peppers, aubergines, courgettes. You can try adding dairy products to food to make things milder, and really just trying out new flavour combinations. So you could put something sweet with something savoury, or something bland with something that's a bit sharp. So it's really all about experimenting and maybe just varying the types of food that you eat and rediscovering your taste buds with different flavours and combinations. Okay, and there's so many different foods now in supermarkets that you can try. So just have fun with it. Try and eat different things, do the technique as Faye has said, just try it out as often as you can. Really important to try it before your meal times or before you have a drink of something. Just give these jaw and tongue movements a little shot and just see what difference there is with maybe using some different foods, and you might just notice a big difference. Okay, so it's all about experimenting, having a little bit of fun along the way, and hopefully being able to gain more from your sense of taste and smell, because I think everybody's quite impacted by it. Has anybody, I know we've spoken about spices as being something that can stimulate your sense of taste and smell. Has anybody found that anything else is either you can smell more clearly or taste more clearly? It could be herbs like mint or, yes, John.
Yeah, what I found was quite strange. You were saying about experimenting is that I I started to like foods that I didn't like before and got great flavour from. So mushrooms and ginger tomatoes are two foods that I eat now that I never really did before. And so foods I don't like, I seem to get more flavour from, and now I do like. Very strange.
Interesting. Yeah, and we would love to sort of share, we'd love for you to share all this with us so that we can follow up on this, because I think it's something that would make a big difference to people and the enjoyment they get. So if you've got tips on the sort of foods that you can now taste or that you like that you didn't like before, or vice versa, we'd love to hear about it moving forward from the workshop today. Great. Okay, anybody else?
Colin has popped a comment in the in the chat, and he finds that single malts tend to help his sense of taste. Now, I'm not sure, is that before every meal or just, you know, generally on its own?
Just have a drink.
I think that's what got me like it in the first place.
Fantastic. That's a tip for everybody.
Unfortunately, still can't stand Marmite.
Yeah.
Every bowl is different.
Well, I think, you know, it's definitely something to consider. Everybody should have all of these as options. We've had a couple of comments in the chats that Ian says that obviously the stronger the flavours, the more it tastes. Yeah, radiotherapy has killed off the love of food, but it is returning. And I think, you know, the thing to remember about this is that we have these rehabilitation techniques for a reason. And it's so that you can regain some of this, these senses. So if you don't know about the techniques, then things are always going to carry on the same. But now that you've got a few tips and tricks, it's about trying it and experimenting and seeing whether that love of food and that passion can come back. Again, some people saying that they find sugary and sweet foods very nasty to eat now. So the radiotherapy can change how you perceive taste as well. So the things like John was saying, the things that you used to love before probably don't taste the same anymore, and therefore you don't enjoy it. Adding fish sauce adds flavour. Again, Gary, really good point, because this is about those strong flavours that then you're able to stimulate the receptors a lot better. Any other experiences or tips or tricks that anybody's found have been particularly useful?
Well, the main time.
Oh, John, you've just frozen for me.
Yeah, and everything. Sorry, John. Can you try that again? You froze for a second.
I was saying that the main flavour I get since radiotherapy is salt. Everything tastes salty, no matter what I do.
Yeah.
Everything.
So you tend to avoid saltier foods, do you then? Because that presumably would even heighten that even more, that sense of salt.
Well, we don't add salt to anything, pasta or potatoes or veg, because everything tastes of salt. You'll be amazed that you can taste salt in ice cream and bread and things like that. Yeah, not nice.
All the hidden salt that you're heightened more to know. Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. Very interesting. George, did you want to?
Oh, you're on mute, George. That's usually my trick.
My problem is mustard. I can't take mustard at all. My eyes start watering, and nowadays, if you go out for a meal, mustard is in so many things nowadays. That's my main problem, and I've got to make sure that anything I order, there's not going to be any mustard in it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a very strong food, isn't it, mustard? But it's even stronger for you now, like John with his salt. Yeah.
You're right. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Sorry, I wonder if anybody else experiences this. Now, I can taste every.
Oh.
I can taste the sage, the salt, the parsley. I can break it all down. It's quite strange. I wonder if anyone else can do it. I no longer taste a meal like if I did a chili. I would taste everything in it separately, coriander and kidney beans, and no longer as a meal as a.
Anybody else experience that, where you recognise the ingredients rather than the meal as a whole? Okay. I mean, I think that, some people do find that their palate becomes a little bit more sensitive. Radiotherapy can have all sorts of impacts on that sort of whole area. And some people can become a little bit more sensitive to the individual ingredients rather than just the meal. And I think we become very aware of that lack of sense of smell and taste. If anybody was unfortunate enough who doesn't have a laryngectomy to have COVID and had their taste and smell impacted, that's the only thing I can relate to in terms of what you guys are experiencing. And again, your palate changes and the sensitivity to different ingredients and flavors changes. So that can be really disconcerting. And for you, John, that sounds like it's more of a hindrance than it is a help. Most people would love to be able to identify what's in their food, but when you're doing that with every single ingredient in a meal, it might take away from the pleasure. Yeah, so Carolyn, absolutely. She agrees about the mustard and wasabi.
Oh, that's even stronger.
Blows her head.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that would blow most people's head, to be fair. Any other tips or tricks that anybody can think of?
We've spoken a lot about food. Are there any drinks that you find you can taste better than others, or drinks that are really strong now since surgery?
Apart from the whiskey. No, Carolyn, that was definitely an error of judgment there, I have to say, about the wasabi. How does everybody find things like tea and coffee? I mean, for us in the UK, it's a staple part of what we have. And have your tastes changed with tea and coffee? Do you get the same pleasure out of it?
When I started my operation and radiotherapy,
Yeah.
I would have eat like it was a little bit sweet. Now,
yeah,
back down to.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people are finding that that's changed. And we are a country that relies heavily on a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. So when that changes, and that's usually that social interaction as well, let's go for a coffee or let's go for a tea. It's a difficult one, isn't it? It changes everything about life. Yeah, so some people are saying they need to make it more sweet. Sorry, Carrie, go ahead.
Just wait after the operation. Very few years because I was but my first cup of tea, I couldn't eat. I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, and then disappointing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is nothing worse post surgery when that's the one thing you crave. And of course, then when you have it, it just doesn't fit the bill, does it? Yeah. Doesn't fit the bill.
The thing I find with tea now, it's very subtle, but I can literally differentiate between the various makes of tea bags.
Oh wow!
You know,
Wow.
depending what it is, you know, there is a subtle, I find a subtle difference between PG Tips, Deadly, Yorkshire, just by the
That's quite
I
a
mean, you
skill.
guys have developed all
we'll have to
sorts
do a
of new
live taste
skills.
test.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, with John with it being able to pull out every ingredient in a meal and you differentiating between teas, I mean, I think these are new skills that you guys have developed.
Become food
These
critics.
are new. Yeah, absolutely. But it does show the level of sensitivity that some people actually have, being able to differentiate between real subtle changes. So again, you know, Alan, do you think that that helps your enjoyment of the drink, or does it hinder?
I find it doesn't either help or hinder. It's just a new experience. It's, you know, before a cup of tea was a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And likewise, a cup of coffee was a cup of coffee. Now, being able to differentiate the subtle nuances, as they say, in these worlds, between the various blends, it's nice.
Yeah, yeah. A pleasant change rather than some of the more unpleasant changes. Yeah, yeah. That's really useful to know. Yeah, so James has mentioned that he uses coffee as a vehicle to be able to drink the 40 sips. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, beer and apple juice. Sorry, John, I cut you off there. What were you saying?
Then what a good idea that is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean it's definitely something that that is really impacted on the majority of you here in some degree or another. And I think hopefully today what we've been able to do is share a very quick technique that can give some of you some instant like response. So at least you know that there's an opportunity for it to work. And moving forward, what I would suggest is definitely practice, practice, practice. Use it before you have anything to eat or drink, and also when you want to smell anything else. You know, just keep remembering to lower that jaw with the tongue down. We've got a Sharpie addict up there, I can see. Yeah. Yes, Alan.
The one thing, of course, we should all remember about this is the effect the change in our taste and smell has on our partners.
Yeah.
Because although Jenny's not with you at the moment, when out shopping, she will try spray perfume on her wrist and automatically put it under my nose and say, "Do you like this?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely forgetting that I literally can't smell it. So I just nod politely and say, "Yes, that's not bad."
But now you see, Alan, when she does that, you can do this jaw movement and you might actually be able to smell it and say, "That's awful. Don't get that."
I don't let her know that I could anyway, but I could smell it. But there we go. You know, it's she said, you know, sometimes she totally forgets and it does embarrass a little that she's doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's very difficult, isn't it, for other people to appreciate this as something that impacts on you when they don't have that experience themselves. And partners and family members and even, you know, friends, they do forget. So, and it's a natural thing, even when it's something that's, I mean, I never understood my children saying to me, "Oh, this really smells bad, Mum. Smell it." Why would I want to smell it if it smells bad? But you know, we do that as a human race. We want to share these experiences, or oh, smell this candle, you know, whatever it might be. It smells lovely. You know, we it's a shared experience. But when you've got people who forget that actually that's one of the areas that you struggle with, it can be a little bit frustrating at times. So yeah, it's just reminding people that, you know, actually it's really hard for me to do that, and I can try this technique, but it might not always work, and some days might be better than others, and or you know, this doesn't work for me. So I totally appreciate your point there, Alan, and it's a really valid one to make.
As Faye said, if you want to get any more information in this technique or have a bit of guidance, go back to your speech and language therapists, speak to them about it and see if they can help you with it, and hopefully they'll be able to make a difference in helping you to get this to be the best that it can be, to give you the best smell and taste that you can have. Okay, we're just being asked at the minute if everybody would mind if their photo went on social media. Would that be okay? Would anybody have any objection if just a shot of us on our call at the minute, if a photo of that went onto social media?
None from me.
Okay, if anybody doesn't want photos to go on social media, if you just let us know in the chat, or just unmute and tell us. Okay.
Amazing. So I think that's pretty much everything, isn't it, Hannah? I think we've got a couple of slides just about where you can get some more support if you need that, or where you can seek some support either through ATOS or, you know, some other independent sites. So we'll just pop those slides up so that you can see those. I think the first one is our usual one, which is obviously you've got your customer care agent. They will be able to help you with anything to do with your products. If you have a nurse, then obviously you can tap into them for some support. And these My Life online events, you know, we really enjoy doing them, and hopefully you get so much out of them. So those are some of the ways that you can utilize us. I think the next slide are just a couple of additional resources that you might be able to use as support. So one of the really helpful sites is the laryngectomy site. So that's laryngectomy.info. So obviously there they have lots and lots of different bits of information about the whole journey. And obviously we've got some other support networks there for you. And then obviously you can follow us. Yeah, Alison, I'll let you take this one. I couldn't remember which one of us was doing this bit.
I was just going to say you can also get support online and up-to-date information on all things laryngectomy from the ATOS Facebook page and Twitter page, as well as YouTube, including which events are going to be taking place that you might be interested in attending, like the one today. Okay, and just some upcoming laryngectomy events. On the 20th of July, there is going to be a masterclass in adhesives, so talking about all things adhesives and how you can get the best adhesive for your skin and the best fits, and how to remove and apply and care for your skin to get the most out of your adhesives. And then on the 3rd of August, there's going to be a film screening of Can You Hear My Voice? I don't know if anyone's heard of Can You Hear My Voice or has seen it.
Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah.
For some people, it's really good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So it's basically a screening of some people with laryngectomy that come together and they sing in a choir, and it shows you the journey of that. So worth the watch. Well worth the watch. Okay, as we said, let us know how you get on. We'd really love to hear from you. You can email us directly just to let us know if this technique that we've spoken about today has made any difference, or if it's not made any difference, or if you've gone to speak to your speech and language therapist and they've given you some good tips that you would like to share. We'd love to hear how you're getting on going forward. Okay, but it's been such a good workshop today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I've learned so many new things as well about smell and taste after surgery, and we wish you all the best in trying to get taste and smell, if not fully back, partially back, and just begin to enjoy smelling things again. Okay.
Amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome, John.
Very
Oh,
welcome. It's an
welcome, John.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you.
As
Great to see
always, thank
everybody.
you, and till the next one.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Lorraine, we've got some tracky events as well. They should be landing in your email inbox in the next week or so, or on your doorstep of what they are, and some Larry ones too. Yeah. You're welcome.
Fabulous. Have a great day, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Bye. Bye.